Everyone, it is Hit and Hustle from OurSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama on this beautiful Thursday. How are you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing great. I'm excited, man. I'm excited for this week. I'm excited for the Irish to get back at it.
Got to get another game in. Get kind of the taste out of our mouths over. It's always difficult to break down a loss, right? Like, how many times have you watched the game from last week?
I usually watch it like 3 times.
I've watched it 3 or 4 times. I mean, it's not like all the way through, but I've seen every play a bunch. And it's informative, and I've been waiting for that because we've got no tape or nothing on the team. And so to be able to break down a game is obviously very fun and cool. But I'd rather it was a win. So it's a lot more fun to
always more fun when it's a win.
Sort of thing. Yeah. So thank you everyone for tuning in so far, and people who are going to be popping in. We're going to be talking about Marshall. We're going to be previewing that game a little bit. We're going to go over the things that Marcus Freeman said in the press conference this week, the little updates. But before we get started, I think we should acknowledge the fact that it is a somber day for a lot of people in the world. Queen Elizabeth has passed away. And we are sensitive to that. We are sensitive to the big news, right? I feel like when a monarch like that passes away, it deserves some sort of recognition. So condolences to anyone who is out there listening who is affected by that. And, hang in there. I guess it's King Charles now who's gonna
King Charles, yeah. King Chuck.
King Chuck, yeah. So and especially the wife of our leader, the Godfather, Mike Frank. So, again, condolences to everybody. All right, let's get into it. Marcus Freeman press conference. A lot of news today, Jamie. A lot of news that's relevant to, I guess, the team and injuries and that sort of thing. So the first bit of news is he said Jarrett Patterson is essentially going to be good to go. He said unless something crazy happens in the next 48 hours, he's gonna go. He's been practicing all week, and if you've been practicing all week, and it's today's Thursday, you've gotten the game plan, you've gotten the you've gotten everything in. So it looks like that's going to be a go for him. Are you surprised by that, Jamie? I am a little bit.
I am surprised. I thought he was going to be out for a while. My guess after the game was that I was like, oh, he probably won't play till BYU or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I think. Just thought that they would try to rest him and get him completely healthy. But I mean, I guess he did come close to playing versus Ohio State. So, and if he was close and it was like a legitimate thing where it wasn't just like, oh, he's just getting ready for that big game, like, then yeah, I mean, if he's practicing and all that, I mean, that's good. Obviously they need him. They really do need him. And I do think as I started to watch, like, I know we won't get into it here, but I'm starting to watch a little bit more Cal and digging into them as well, too. And I think, Cal's got a good defensive line. They have a good defense. I think, Marshall has some dudes up front, too. So, I mean, if you want to get a guy that, to tighten things up in terms of, what you're doing, especially like when it comes to mental errors and stuff, too, you want to get him back out there.
Yeah, and I think the leadership was missed there. I talked about it in the video for that I did on the by ourselves for the Notre Dame offense, and I just felt like they had a leadership kind of void on the offense. When you lose Jarrett Patterson, he's not out there. When you lose Avery Davis, those are captains, and something that I think that we kind of. I won't speak for you. At least for me, I overlooked the fact that the defense had so much returning. They had so much experience returning, and guys who had played in big games, guys who had played together. They had been a part of, the big moments together and that sort of thing. Guys you could kind of count on to play in a big moment. And the offense didn't have that, beyond, Michael Mayer basically. And Josh Luggs played a lot of football, but Tyler Buckner, first time starter, Audric Estime as well. Zeke Correll, he didn't get a ton of snaps. With Blake Fisher starting his third game, I think it was. Joe Alt and that sort of thing. So you didn't have that leadership, right? And I think to install that into the offense with Jaret Patterson, I think that's going to be a huge deal beyond the fact that he's a very talented player, right? And that's why he's been starting for as long as he has. Another injury update was regarding Joe Wilkins, who it's almost like that situation kind of backtracked a little bit, where going into Ohio State, he said no limitations, no hesitation, only played one snap. And now in this game, it's like, well, he's getting closer, right? And so that's a contradiction a little bit. But again, that I think that helps the offense. When I saw him moving around, even in the videos, I thought he was favoring his foot. It just didn't seem like he was fully healthy.
I mean, it was kind of shocking to me that he was going to be ready for that game. Yeah. Even just watching him in camp, I was like, I can't even believe he's doing these drills right now. Like, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess from that standpoint, I did think it was surprising. So it's not at all shocking to me that, they're kind of slowing it down there. And I mean, it's just something you can't rush with a foot. You can't rush.
No. Yeah, especially at that position, right? Like, because the other part too is like, if he's favoring it, then that exposes the rest of your body to something else, right? So, hopefully he continues to get healthy and they kind of push him along. I do feel it might be closer to that October kind of date that we were thinking about originally. But the fact that he's with the team, and he's been a kind of a part of the game plan and that sort of thing, I do think that speeds up the kind of when he is healthy and ready to go. I think he'll be closer to being a major contributor than he would be if he had kind of just started ramping up right now. Let's go. C. Dot. Good afternoon, fellas. Hope all is well. Thank you very much. Hope all is well with you. Thank you for tuning in today. And so the other part that I thought the press conference that I thought was notable was Freeman openly discussing how they wanted to be more open with the offense, right? They wanted to take shots and they're not worried about controlling the ball today. What did you make of those comments?
I think he's been really honest in a lot of these press conferences, which I don't know if that is always going to be the norm.
Yeah.
Like if like year 4 of Marcus Freeman is going to be quite the same. I mean, I like it. It's good because he's saying what I think is obvious to a lot of people, like that you can't play that kind of style every week, right? You can't play that kind of style every week. And you have to, first of all, too, the other thing is that he has to kind of say that because, you have 3 really good wideouts committed. You're trying to bring in another wideout in this class, and you want, you got another Cam Williams. You got in the 2024 class. You have CJ Carr. You can't be like, we're really gonna be like one of these 8 targets to wide receivers each week. Like, no, that's not. People don't want to. No one wants to play in that offense. Right. No one wants to play in that offense, right? So, I mean, you might as well be playing in the triple option offense, right? In terms of that kind of number of targets to receivers. So I think when you look at it from that, it just makes sense to kind of like get it out there. Like, we're going to do that. And I mean, obviously you got to go where the game plan kind of dictates it. And they are going to be a team that I think, relies on that, but like you got to do, they have to do a lot more to kind of open it up and spread things out. And I also think it was hard to get a rhythm last week to open things up. And it was either like shot play or and they did actually do a decent number of shot plays considering the number of like throws that they had.
Right. Yeah. By percentage, it was a good amount. And they wanted to take more, honestly. There were times when they had shots called and they couldn't get it off. So
so there was things like that. And then I just think like in general, like, I mean, you want to use the whole field, and I don't think they did it in that first game. So, I mean, it was refreshing to hear him say it, but I mean, I was a little surprised that he said it.
Nothing intermediate last week, which they got to do that. They had the one down the seam to Bauman off of kind of a design play, and then they Buckner threw like an in route to Lindsey, which was very ill advised. Should have he should have been looking at Styles on the other side. But it's like beyond that, they didn't do anything intermediate between 10 to 12 yards. And you need to you need to be able to do that. If you're going to be like a real offense, you need to be able to hit intermediate stuff. That's what Jack Cohn was really good at, right? And we talked about it last, throughout the offseason. Like that was one thing that Jack Cohn was really excellent in that area. And we don't know that about Buckner. And so that's something that we do want to see. It is funny to me how like throughout the off season and camp and everything, like no information, no nothing. And then on the Thursday before, it's like, yeah, we're opening it up. We're not going to try to control the clock in this game. Like basically letting the game plan out there the Thursday before the game. So,
I mean, I'm sure Marshall expects it. Like,
Marshall probably does. It's like
that's not the kind of thing that's going to give away what they're going to do.
It's not a revelation to them. They are probably very aware that Notre Dame is going to take shots with them, because that's what the higher level teams do when they play lower level teams, right? That's just normal. They need to be prepared for everything. There's nothing that they are overlooking. So, but it is funny to me how they guard information so closely, and then we're talking about this. Okay. So let's talk about Marshall, Jamie. Tell me about what they can do, what they are good at, because I was on one of my pods, the Untitled podcast last night, and my co-host Michael, he asked me about there's no way Notre Dame loses, and I was like, I don't know how to answer that anymore after what happened with Toledo last year, because it's like if Toledo took a knee on the 1 yard line as that guy's running into the end zone, they probably run out the clock and kick a field goal and Notre Dame loses. So they're favored by 20.5, right? No one would ever predict Notre Dame would lose this game, but I think that we shouldn't completely overlook these teams and like the weapons that they have and what they can do and what they're good at when it comes to, like, look, a team like Notre Dame that didn't look great on offense last week. If that continues, if you're not scoring a lot of points, then you're going to be vulnerable to anyone. So tell me about Marshall. You've done a kind of a what's the word I'm looking for, Jamie? Where did you write on that? A preview, right? Like a breakdown. So tell me about Marshall. Tell me about what they can do.
They have some good talent. Henry Colombi's a transfer from Texas Tech. He was previously at Utah State before that. So he was like a Matt Wells guy, right? So Matt Wells was at Utah State and then Texas Tech. He followed him there. Good player, right? Good player. Like played at Texas Tech and was productive, right? Not like a full-time starter, but started some games. I mean, he's got a couple 300-yard games in there. I mean, it is the Big 12. So, I mean, everybody and their mother has had a 300-yard game in the Big 12 if you start a quarterback there, but he's an accurate thrower. He's got a pretty decent arm. He's a good athlete. He can move the chains with his legs. He's like a good group of 5 quarterback. Could seemingly start for, some Power 5 teams. In the backfield, obviously they're missing Rasheen Ali, who was like their big star guy. He was the best player on their team, no doubt, last year, and would have been the guy for them this year. But they have a pretty good backfield, right? And then Kalen LeBourne, who recruiting fans will probably know, he was a 5-star kid, went to Florida State. I think if people really remember, he was. I mean, I remember I was there. He was the guy who. Rolled up to the opening in a Lamborghini and committed to Florida State. And it was one of those Bleacher Report when they were doing those videos kind of thing. Right. So, and then obviously it kind of went all downhill from there. Like it didn't go good for him, but it wasn't because of talent. Like he just kind of fizzled out. He had some other stuff that was going on there. And he never kind of became the guy that they expected him to be. But, hadn't played since 2019. Had a 100-yard game the first game, looked pretty good, right? Looked pretty good. I think the one thing on offense, I mean, I saw Marcus Freeman said they got some explosive. They don't really have that many explosive guys. They got a couple guys who can run pretty well. They got a really big 6'3", 220 wideout Gamage, who's like kind of their go-to guy, but he's not like a dominant, contested catch guy. He's decent, but he's not like they're not going to throw it up to him. He's got to box out people, like he's not going to go over the top of people. So, they're a bit limited at receiver, and then offensive line. They're replacing most of the offensive line from last year. And and I was saying to Mike Frank when we were doing our show yesterday that the way to kind of look at their offensive line, and I think it's appropriate because I watched them versus Norfolk State, and they're fine at that level for it. But the difference between they're in the Sun Belt now, but the difference between like a Sun Belt and Conference USA, the biggest difference is the line play, right?
Yeah.
The hugest difference, especially offensive line, because you're just not going to get many guys there that are NFL type guys, right?
Yeah.
Or if you get 300-pound guys, they're not the guys who have like the most agile feet or anything like that, right? There's always something wrong with a lot of those guys. You might get the rare guy who's just like, some converted tight end who ends up being like a freak left tackle or something like that. But there's just not a lot of guys. So Kane Madden, who came in there and was, All-American, best, like basically lineman of the year, Conference USA, whatever. He came to Notre Dame, and I think people had these expectations. And I remember saying to people, like, if you watch the film, he was good for that league, but you could tell like he wasn't going to come there and tear it up at Notre Dame, and he was a below average starter for Notre Dame, compared to the standard that they had, right? And so when you look at it from that perspective, if that's like the best guy that they had, that's kind of what you're going against there. Like, they're not all Kane Maddens, but you know what I mean? Like, they're just like that kind of level is about as high as you can get. So it's really a chance for Notre Dame's defensive line to get really healthy this week in a way, like in terms of pressure. I don't think their left tackle's very good. He's 6'9", plays way too high. I think, from that sense, like they ran all over Norfolk State. I think it's going to be a lot tougher to run on Notre Dame. Defensively, I mean, they got some players. Cumberlander's the edge guy, really good motor, undersized. He's 6'3", 235, but good, good motor. He's gonna make those tackles work. Watts is a kid who's a Purdue transfer, played there, and I remember watching him when I was watching Purdue film last year, and he's a good player. Like he can play. Had 20 starts at Purdue, and they got they have some good linebackers. They're good in the secondary. They got good athletes in the secondary. They got 2 corners that I think are probably going to be NFL prospects. Micah Abraham's a guy who last year 8th in the country in passes defense. So like just productive guys, both the guys very productive finding the football. And we always talk about finding the football. So they're not a pushover on defense. So if Notre Dame comes out and they play kind of like execute at the level that they did against Ohio State, I mean, they're going to have a much tougher time, in saying that they don't have nearly the level of athletes that Ohio State has. And I mean, I do think Notre Dame is going to be able to run the ball with them and have more chances to open it up.
Yeah. Speaking of that, so ND Nation, would be nice to see Tyler Buchner have time to do some things. So, and this brings me to a question that was asked on the Irish Sports Daily message board today, about what you would rather see. And it's one of those things, like you want to kind of see everything against like you don't want to have to choose, but what is more important to you in this game, as far as what is more important to you, that Tyler Buchner throws for like 300 yards or for the running game to hit 200 yards on the ground? Just if you had to choose one, which one would you want to see?
I think 200 yards in the ground. I think 100%, because I think with Buchner, it's more important that you see that kind of next step with the level of efficiency, making the right decisions. He doesn't need to throw for 3 bills to do that. I mean, yeah, you want to see them create big plays and whatever, but like, if he throws for 3 bills and 2 of them are like slants where, Lorenzo Styles just outruns their defense or something like that. Like, I mean, what is that telling you? Right.
Yeah.
It's not telling you as much as, and I think where they're going to go and where they need to go, I think you have to be able to run the football. if you want to get to that baseline of wins, you got to be able to run the football. You have to be able to do these certain things. And we saw, and that was one of the reasons, like against Toledo, they couldn't run the football against Toledo last year. And that was like a big problem, right? So if that would be a huge red flag if they can't run the ball against this, Marshall team, which obviously they're going to do their best to try to screw things up front and, try to confuse what Notre Dame's doing. But if Notre Dame doesn't run the ball well this week, that's concerning, because I think they'll have a tough time running against Cal and then some of these other teams that they're going to face.
Yeah, and I think when those kind of questions get asked, you're always picturing in your mind like 300 yards, but like a certain kind of way, right? Like I remember when Notre Dame was playing, it was either Bowling Green or New Mexico State in 2019, and they had a bunch of yards, but it was like 150 of those yards came on like those little
those pop jet sweep pop passes.
Yeah, like Avery Davis got one, and Chris Fink got one, and it's like those count as passing yards, but like we didn't see those plays at any other game in the year. They're not doing that in a game that matters. So it's like when you say 300 yards, like you're thinking of open up passing game, like hitting crossers, perfectly schemed, posts with a corner behind, it's just like, that's what people are thinking about. And basically to me, it's all about efficiency. It just, no matter what they do, because here's the thing that people, I think, are kind of missing with regard to the game last week, right? Because people are very concerned about, people are very concerned about the play calling and the game plan and all that, right? And I understand that, running a ball at them didn't work, and so there's naturally, we should have done the other thing, right? They got it wrong.
Call the good plays. Call the plays that work.
Call the touchdown.
Call the plays that work. Yeah.
I want to see more of the touchdown plays. But to me, when you watch it, because in the second half, there was a difference in the way Tommy Rees called the game generally. Now, there was the 1st and 25 drive that, okay, fine. Like qualms about that. No, fair is fair. But I think in everything that they did, like if you chart out every game, every play that they ran, whether it was a shot play, whether it was a running play inside, whether it was, spreading them out in 11, it was, you didn't see many plays that were just run really well.
No, the execution was bad.
Everything was a little bit sloppy, it just wasn't crisp. The execution was poor, no matter what they did.
Even that first play of the game, like Mayer whiffed on the block. That's why.
Yeah, like Buckner, that was not a well-executed play.
Yeah.
It turned out well because Buckner made a great play and Styles made a great play. But up front, it was they lost, right? That's a negative grade, right? So I think the thing that we should want to see, no matter what they do, is execution, efficiency, and then explosiveness.
Yeah.
Right. So because here's the thing is, in ND Nation's talking about, seeing what Buckner has, and you got to have him reps throw the ball. Like that's true. Right. But I think more importantly, you need to see the offense as a whole performing at a level that leads to like, okay, this is repeatable. And this is something that they can build off of going forward, because that was, to me, the biggest thing about the Ohio State game was it wasn't efficient, and it wasn't crisp, and it was just the execution level was really poor. That's my big thing. It's less so the game plan and more so they were not ready to play a good football game for whatever reason. So
third down, that's what I want to see. So, like, I want to see him make the right reads, make accurate throws, move the chains on third down this game. That's more than anything, that's number one on the list for Buckner for me, because if they get 3rd and 7, you know, I mean, you got to convert them. You got to convert them in some games. You know what I mean? You have to do it. You can't always rely on being, 3rd and medium all the time. I mean, that's what you want to be 3rd and medium, 3rd and short.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you got to convert on 3rd and 6 plus. So that's what I would like to see, a few of those in this game, no matter how they do it, because obviously they were doing a lot of stuff too, where it's like 3rd and 9, we're going to like call, a Buckner QB draw. Like, you got to trust them. You got to do more. And some of that is on the road. And I get it. I do understand a lot of those calls, but eventually, like, you're going to play when you get to, you get to this Cal game, you get to BYU, on the road. North Carolina, even though North Carolina doesn't have a good defense, still you're going to have some times where, you're going to have to score because they're going to score some points, right? So you have to be able to do these things. You got to execute. You have to be able to move the chains when it's not ideal. And just, that's what we haven't seen enough from Buckner yet. And I think if you look at from last year too, that was the thing. Like, early downs, he looked really good throwing the ball. 3rd downs, he looked like a freshman, right? So see that he's shown that progress. Before we move on to the next thing, I just want to just shout out Dan Adams, Hubris Crew on IC's message board, who's in the comments here. Great dude. Always used to see him out at the opening when we were out there. Christian and I had beers with him quite a bit. Good to know that he's in DC now. If we're out there, definitely we'll hit you up. He's a great guy.
All right, Dan Adams. Thank you for this is the first time I've seen Dan in the comments. So thank you for supporting ISD all this time, and thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate that. So all of this depends on the O-line making real improvement. Nothing happens till they get way better. Like, totally true. Like, that's kind of like the base.
It kind of goes without saying.
Yeah. Like, and I think it's going to be very hard for the offense to be efficient or to look good if the offensive line is not clicking. Let me ask you, because I talked to you right after the game, right? And so obviously we have not watched it back at that point, and I haven't talked to you on a pod or anything like that since then. Were you surprised by how they played in the game?
I was surprised by the amount of mental errors.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of those mistakes, like, especially after rewatching it, because I think when you initially watch the game, you're like, man, they're getting whooped. Right. And I think that's the inclination too, when you watch, like, say you see, on the other side of the ball, you see the Notre Dame defensive line not, they're getting the ball run on them. You think, oh, they're getting handled here. And really that wasn't the case. It was, they weren't doing a great job, but there was like poor run fits, one guy missing a thing here. And that was why they were kind of getting run on at the end. Right. So I think with, the offensive line, I was surprised that there was that many mental errors. I mean, obviously, when you look at it, there's still a lot of guys that, so like Blake Fisher, for example, I mean, he played in half a game in that Florida State game. He had never played in kind of like a road atmosphere like that, right? Yeah. Even Joe Alt had his first game in Virginia Tech, but like, that pretty much is the only other game that he's kind of had like that. And same with kind of Kristofic too. Corral has obviously played in, big games. He's played in that Clemson game. He played in Alabama, but it was a different situation. He was surrounded by all veterans across the line. That was like, that was all like Aaron Banks, and you had Aaron Banks and Tommy Kramer right over him, and who played multiple years. And that's a big difference between having Kristofic and Lugg. And I think with Lugg, even though he's played 20 games, it's not like he's been a guy that's like proven at a high level in those games. Right. And also too, like, I don't think he's ever had to be the guy where it's like, well, you're the veteran on the line. He's never had to be that guy. Like, even last year, because Patterson was there. Right. So he's never had to be that. And I don't know if that's like like something that's natural for him to kind of be that guy. But he, and that's why I wrote this today that, I mean, he kind of had to be, he would have had to be that guy, but if they get Patterson back, I think it makes a big difference. So I think I probably didn't think about that enough going into the game if Patterson wasn't available. And I do think that did have an impact on the game.
Yeah. And just to comment, like Westwood asked if we were surprised or disappointed. I was definitely disappointed. But yeah, I think you can be surprised or you can be disappointed without being surprised. I was both in this situation. And to be honest, it did look a lot like the first month last season where there were a lot of busts and a lot of missed assignments. And I was really surprised by that. I
think for me though, last year was more them getting their butts kicked. Like it was like, oh, they're not good. Like, it's like, can you reach block this guy? No, you actually physically can't reach this guy.
Yeah.
Like, you actually are just getting whipped in protection. Like you're just getting beat bad. Like it wasn't like, oh, this is just like a horrible mistake on a stunt or whatever. Like it was more like physically, like guys were getting overwhelmed, especially when they started getting to the the backups left.
It got worse because you like Patterson was replaced by someone who had started 7 or 8 games, whatever it was, that from Kristofic, right? Like they replaced him with a starter, whereas Fisher was replaced by someone who had never played in a game, and then he was replaced by someone who had never played in a game. So it's a little bit different, but just in terms of like, I thought like the amount of times, like for example, when they kept coming on the what do you call them? You are always talking about green dogs and fire dogs or whatever you call it. The delayed blitz.
Yeah.
So delayed blitz from the mic.
Green
is that
dog,
what you call it on the
yeah. Green dog is green dog is essentially like, think of like green means go, right? So like backer has like the back in man coverage. He activates if he sees that guy's staying in the block. Right. So, I mean, every team does it. It's like a thing. And you could call it a delayed blitz, but it's like not a called blitz. It's like if this happens, you go.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a green dog. And like, I mean, that one play, it might have been actually a called where he just waited for that. And I mean, it could have been just a really good thing. Like, and maybe he blew should have taken Estemi out in the flat because nobody had him on the one sack that, or not sack, but it was like he got hit on that play. But yeah, that's like something that, most of the time that's on the back, right? That's on the back to be able to pick that up because that's who you have, right? And you have to be aware. And that's another thing to mention too, because I think with, and we don't know on that one particular play. And for those who don't know, Greg broke it down. It was the first play. I believe it was the first play of the second half, the slot fade to Styles, right? And so it is kind of indistinguishable. Is this on Carell? Like, is this on Carell? Should he went out to help on the D tackle. Was he supposed to be aware, head on a swivel, and pick that backer up who kind of delayed and did like what looked like a green dog? Or was Esteme supposed to wait and he left too soon?
Yeah.
Right. We don't know for sure. But I mean, I would lean just based on experience that it would probably more on Esteme because this is the first time he's doing it. And Carell hasn't, has more experience doing that. And that's another thing that kind of gets added into it. It's like, well, because Chris Tyree, he probably stays in and picks it up if that's the case. But we don't know for sure, of what happened there. But yeah, it is a kind of interesting dynamic there. And I mean, if I'm looking at it this week too, I'm looking at all that kind of stuff that Ohio State had success with. And I mean, I'm if you didn't have it in your toolkit already. You're adding some of
They're
that.
definitely going to do that. I mean, because it reminded me of the opening play of the Purdue game last year, where they did the same thing. They did a delayed blitz, the back left, and Cone took it right in the face. That's why I say, like, it reminded me of kind of stuff that happened last year. Is it relevant? I mean, just talking about, I guess it's not super important whether it's on Corell or on Estime, but I think the fact that Estime, the fact that he delayed makes me think you're
that makes me think he was supposed to. Yeah, that makes me think that he was supposed to stay. That makes me think he was supposed to stay in. The fact that he didn't release right away, it makes me think he was supposed to stay in, and that he probably got chewed out. And then here's the other thing: when they talked about it, they're like, "Why wasn't Estime playing?" Oh, just different the game plan. That might have been why he didn't play.
Yeah,
and also, I don't think, maybe Brian Kelly would have mentioned Estime blew that block or whatever, right? But Marcus Freeman isn't going to mention that.
Right,
That's the other thing. And I mean, it's kind of flipping topics here, but I just have to say, just another Marcus Freeman appreciation post here for like really kind of protecting his players after the game and his coaches too, where, we say that he's being honest with some of these things, but I think really, obviously he's very diplomatic, after the game, and, was purposely so, not to kind of put heat. I'm sure private conversations are different and whatever, but he could have said, BK probably would have ripped the O-line in the post game. He probably would have. He ripped what happened in the LSU game, right? Like, he ripped guys after that. So, he ripped Sam Mustipher for the snaps in the friggin', hurricane, right? Like, I think, I appreciate that Marcus Freeman kind of, if that was, or if it wasn't, I appreciate him not mentioning stuff like that, because the kids don't need that. They're already getting ripped when behind closed doors. They don't need to get ripped in public.
Well, so the coaches, right? So there's two main things coming out of the game on Ohio State that are like huge talking points. One, the safety blitz. Okay. And Freeman said, we discussed it at the timeout. We both agreed this is what we want to do. Al thought it was a good idea, and I thought it was a good idea. Very clearly said it got my sign off, right? Like, I signed off on this. The other part was that he said it was my edict. I wanted to run the ball. I wanted to control the clock, right? So basically saying, like, don't get on Reese for the game plan. It was my idea, right? I told him I don't want to get into a track meet with these guys now. So it's like, you can get on Reese for the play calls if you want, but the fact of the matter is that the game plan is the game plan, and you can't go back. Like, because look, they practice these plays for 2 weeks. Okay, like, you can't just say, we practice these plays for 2 weeks.
I think there's a lot of people who think you just get a whiteboard out and you just draw stuff up and you can do it. But especially early on in the season, it's definitely not that simple. You can't go back to like, hey, remember what we did during that Purdue week? Like, you can't go. There is nothing to go.
There is no Purdue week,
right?
So, and the other part too is like, okay, 3rd and 9. That doesn't mean on 3rd and 9 you got to run quarterback draw. Okay, that's not what that means at all, especially when it's a check. So there's that part of it. But the fact that the game plan is the game plan. You have to run the plays that you've been practicing, not just for 2 weeks, like for a month. So, and that's Marcus Freeman saying it was my call, right? Don't get on Tommy Reese. This is me, right? It's both of us. So, like you said, like that is a real thing on Freeman that
matters to coaches and players, man.
Right.
That matters. And believe me too, obviously you hear good stuff about him and the feedback from the players and stuff like that too. But you want to talk about when it gets into recruiting too. If the coach knows the head coach has his back and the players know the coach has his back, they're relaying that to the recruits. Like that is important. Yeah. That is really important. Right. Like, and I'm not saying like, people used to badmouth like Brian Kelly and whatever, but I guarantee if they probably asked them about it, they're probably like, yeah, I wasn't really that, I'm not really close with him. He's a good coach, whatever. We win games, whatever. But like, he's not, and it's a different dynamic, obviously, with Marcus Freeman.
So what are the defense this week? What do you want to see from those guys, right? Because I mentioned in the buy or sell video with the defense, obviously a very good performance, right? And there's no taking away from that, right? It's 21 points against Ohio State. Absolutely gave them a chance to win. Absolutely did everything they had to do in order for them to win the game. But there was a lack of playmaking, right? And I texted you yesterday trying to find out what the havoc rate was. It was 5.8, I think you said.
Yep.
Extremely low. I can't remember a game when it was that low, honestly. It's been a very long time. And I think that they do need to show more of that. We need to see more plays on the ball. We need to see forced turnovers. We do need to see penetration in the backfield, more active linebackers, that sort of thing. So what do you want to see from the defense this week?
Yeah, I think, you brought up the havoc rate. I think havoc rate has to go up, like, especially when you're playing against a team that, to me, havoc rate, and obviously for those who don't know what havoc rate is, right? It's TFLs, pass breakups, forced fumbles, interceptions, divided by the number of plays, right? Yeah. So that's your rate on defense, right? How many times are you creating like a negative play? And obviously they didn't create a lot of negative plays in that game, right? I mean, they still, did a pretty good job on defense, but think of if they created more, even if they doubled, which wouldn't be still not a good havoc rate, even if they doubled the amount of havoc that they created in the game, it would have made a big difference in the game, right? Mm-hmm. So, and especially when you're going against these teams that you should have a big advantage up front, like that's to me where all the havoc starts, because it starts with like pass rush, obviously penetration and disrupting them in the running game, all that kind of stuff. You didn't see a lot of like slanting and stunting last week. And part of that I think is like to not like, you don't want to get like they don't want to like guess wrong while you're trying to slant one way. All of a sudden they hit you back with a counter and, the band starts striking up because Henderson's gone for 70. Right. So maybe that's got something to do with it or whatever, but like they need to get in the backfield more, especially when you have guys like Cross and Admiral who are quicker. They're not guys that are going to dominate you at the point of attack just by being like bullies. It's not like you got like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter there. You have guys who are quicker penetrators, right? So, in the interior, and I think even Lacey and Chris Smith are both similar too, right? They're both like that. So I want to see those guys, more movement from those guys. I want to see more stunting on third down. That's another thing. So like, I know Isaiah Foskey greatly struggled in that game, but like give him a little bit different looks, like run some stunts, move him around. And maybe they don't like it because maybe he's been like repping and they're rushing inside and he wasn't doing good. I don't know. But like they can do some different things there to create more confusion, make it harder on the offensive line. So that's what I want to see from this week, is strategically them to make it harder on the offensive line. And it doesn't necessarily mean bringing more rushers, even though I think they will blitz a little bit more this week than they did last week. Obviously didn't blitz a lot last week, and even blitzing Stroud, I mean, he's one of the best guys against the blitz in the country. Yeah. So I think it'll be different this week, but even regardless of blitz, movement up front, a lot more of that.
A question from Westwood. Do we know if Cam Hart is 100%? He didn't totally seem like it. The word is there he's got some sort of hamstring issue, and I did notice there was a kind of like a wrap bandage on one of his legs. So maybe he was dealing with something. I did notice he was a little bit tentative in the game, just kind of period. Not super explosive. And look, if you're dealing with a hamstring problem, if you're dealing with some tightness or whatever, then that is going to be an effect of it, right? You're not going to be as explosive. You're not going to be as sure as yourself. So But I did think he didn't have the same kind of explosiveness that we saw last year or aggressiveness. That was made up for by Clarence Lewis, though. I thought he played a great game. I thought Tariq Bracy played a great game.
Yes.
We do. It's interesting. You know, I thought the safeties were kind of, they weren't bad, but they weren't nondescript, right? Like they were just, their names didn't really come up aside from Brandon Joseph with a big hit on Jackson Smith and Jigba. So
yeah.
I mean, no one looks like Kyle Hamilton. First of all,
I will say that was a Kyle Hamilton-esque impact.
It is definitely something
I would say
Kyle would have done.
When I saw that right away, I was like, that is a Kyle Hamilton type of impact play. And obviously that's, well, I mean, what you would want out of a guy who's brought in to kind of be a Kyle Hamilton replacement. And yeah, I mean, I don't think he's on that level, but he's definitely that was a big time play that you wanted to see. But yeah, I agree with the safeties. Like if you say compared them to Ohio State and how they looked on the of course, yeah,
of course,
you had to take a shot in.
It's fine, it's fine, no problem.
But I was saying, like, if you look at the other side, like Hickman and Ransom, to me, those guys were like,
they were super
awesome.
involved.
They were awesome.
They were great
in that game, and just like running things down and just impactful in the game. Yeah, like obviously it was a different story. It wasn't like the safeties played bad, just not, you want to see more havoc. You want to see just more impactful type of plays like you saw with Joseph there.
They were not a liability at all. I never felt like they were. I feel the same way, Sanders, for sure. I think about it more than I should.
I feel like Joseph probably wouldn't have come. I think he came because he thought he was,
well, he should,
I'm not saying that he wouldn't have, but like
it couldn't have happened. But who wouldn't want to play next to Kyle Hamilton? Is my.
I mean, that would be. I mean, that'd probably. Well, not probably. It'd be the best safety duo in college football. So
yeah, I don't.
It's too raw. It's too raw.
Yeah, it's too soon. Yeah. So and the linebackers as well. I think they need to be more active as well. Marist had a couple plays where he came on the blitz. He blew up Henderson on one, and then he drew the chop block because he blew up Henderson on the first one. But beyond that, there wasn't a ton of activity there. Wasn't, again, the havoc. It just wasn't there. Another situation where not a liability, but also not playmaking, right? Like not being enforcers.
I thought, really like the only plays that stood out were JD Bertrand on the 1 3rd and 2, great fill on that play. Marist, he had those 2 blitzes that were obviously big plays. And then he had one where he was on Stover and just destroyed him off the ball, which was a big time play. And it was like a 2nd and 2 and they converted, but it was like no one else was there, was helped him to make the play. And it was like all him. It was an awesome play. Which kind of showed like, oh yeah, he's a dude. And I thought he did a couple things in coverage too, in terms of like just jamming the crap out of Stover, that I was like, oh, like this is, it jumped out on rewatching the game. So, but yeah, like, I think if you're looking at like, obviously Jack Kaiser's a guy getting a lot of hype, and, got to see him make more plays. Got to see him make more plays. And you hope that is. Obviously, a lot last week, they played nickel. So the only 2 linebackers. This week, I think, they're primarily an 11 team too, but I think you're going to see a little bit more base, even when they're an 11. Yeah.
All right, Jamie, do you think 20.5? What do you think about that? Is Notre Dame covering that?
I think they are. Yeah, I think I think Notre Dame's going to win big by 4 touchdowns at least.
Okay, give me a score then. 4 touchdowns.
Oh, I'm gonna say Notre Dame 45, Marshall 10.
Okay, it's 5 touchdowns. That'll work. That'll definitely work. I think a lot of people will be happy with that. I think Notre Dame puts up 45 points. I think you're going to see a lot of what you want in the running game. in the passing game. We'll do the 55-3 that they did in Norfolk State. All right, Michael, that sounds good to me. 55-3. That would be very exciting. So we would see a lot, right, in that situation. So I'm hopeful.
I will say, I don't think Marshall's like a bad team. So it's like, I think Notre Dame, if that has to happen, that's not going to like just happen. Notre Dame, Marshall's not going to give them the game, right? So Notre Dame has to play well, but I'm predicting that Notre Dame's going to play really well this week.
Right, Mitchell. What I meant was it's a victory, but if 45-10 would be a victory by
5 touchdowns.
Yeah. 6 total. That's what I meant. So, but thank you for keeping me in check. I appreciate that. I need to be on my P's and Q's. So, all right. I think that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Me and Jamie are going to be going on the post-game show right after the game's over. We're going to be talking about the game. Hopefully it'll be 45-10, something like that. Whatever the case may be, we're going to be on the show pretty much right after 5 to 10 minutes after the game ends. You're going to catch us then. You will catch me the morning after. I'll do kind of like a morning after recap, get everyone's kind of get the vibes. Then the PFF numbers are out, so I always go over those with everyone, and then we just go over like a stat review. If you want to check us out there, Jamie and I are adding a hit and hustle to the schedule for next weekend. That's going to be out on Tuesday. We're going to be doing some film stuff. We're going to be breaking down some plays. I think by Tuesday, I think everyone's ready to kind of see that stuff and then move on. And then after that, we'll move on to the Thursday show, and that's going to be more preview for Cal and that sort of thing. So we're adding shows. You're going to want to check us out then. You're not going to want to miss it. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, because that lets you know when we're going live, right? If we ever add a show, that will let you know that we're coming on. So you're going to want to check that out. Check out irisportsdaily.com for all your information. Jeremiah Love is coming this weekend, and that's a big visitor. And if you've checked out Christian's reporting on Irish Sports Daily, that could lead to a very good outcome. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and we will talk to you again on Saturday.